Hello, everyone. I'm Rusty Gowan. I'm president of the BLPS, and this is the August 2018 version of the Black Lake Preservation Society's video newsletter. And we want to do these every time there's something really important to talk to our members about. And that topic today is the results of the shoreline survey that was conducted by the Tip of the Mitt Watershed Council last year with a sponsorship from the Black Lake Association, the BLA. So first off, we'd like to thank the BLA for funding this project, and we'd like to thank the Watershed Council for having the expertise and the foresight to offer this project. And the reason that we're talking about it is because it contains some very important results, and they're not that positive. Our greenbelt is severely degraded. And this same result has been reported to us 4 times now, where we've done this survey 4 times, paid for it 4 times. And the results are that they're reporting the same problems that they did the first, second, and third time. So we want to talk about it and see if we can't promote some sort of response to the findings. If we all don't do our little part, things won't improve. No association is going to come in and change the way you live on your property, or mandate decisions that you make and how you. We've all got to become educated enough to understand what are the decisions and the actions that we take that have an impact. And if we decide personally that we want to make changes, we can. And if we decide not to, at least we've done that with an understanding of the impact of our decisions. The primary recommendation of the Watershed Council is to promote the Michigan Shoreland Stewards Program. Now, I hope that you have seen the communications from Terry Wild that the BLPS has been rolling out the Michigan Shoreland Stewards Program all summer. And if you are interested, and if you haven't been there, you need to go to our website, blacklakepreservationsociety.org, and go to the Our Lakes section. There's a menu option for Our Lakes. A menu will drop down under Our Lakes, and the first item is property owner role in preservation. And if you go there, you're going to get a lot of background information on what the impacts are, the variables that affect the health of our lake that you have control of on your property. And then in step 3 at this page, you'll see a link to the Michigan Shoreline Stewards self-assessment. If you take that assessment, it's just for you. It's going to ask you, do you want to register anonymously or do you want to provide information about your property? Whether you're anonymous or not, your results are anonymous. Nobody cares that what your answers are. They only care that you've taken the self-survey and you learn from it. Okay, when you answer these questions and they provide you feedback and ideas, it's a learning process. The registration function, and we encourage you to register, it associates you with our lake so we can track the metric of how much self-assessment activity is going on in our lake. And for your benefit, it also stores your information so you can go back, revisit it periodically, and maybe have a little program of your own to make changes over time that you decide to. You don't have to make any changes, but you may choose to make some changes. Now, I did this survey with my whole family, and we talked through the answers, and we discussed their ideas and recommendations. And it's personal information. Nobody's going to know what we went through, and it's no one's business but our own. But, we have some ideas of things that we're going to do differently, and we feel good about learning from the survey and having our plan in place, and you may feel that way too. The second thing that the BLPS is doing on this topic is our tributary study that is going on through this year with the Watershed Council. And the shoreline of Black Lake that is of impact is not just the shoreline around the lake, but also the shoreline up and down the tributaries. And of our 6 tributaries, the only one that's really been studied in the past is the Upper Black River, and that's been a focus of Sturgeon for Tomorrow, Trout Unlimited. The Watershed Council has done their own studies. So some organizations have been up there, but no one has looked at the other tributaries until now. So we'll be back to you with the results of that study after it's complete late this fall. So what was covered in the shoreline survey? Really two things. They paddled kayaks around the entire perimeter of the lake, and they had identified two things: the health of the vegetation at the shoreline, which is nature's last line of defense for water migrating toward the lake, and secondly, the presence of cladophora, and this is a type of algae. It's an indicator of excess nutrient pollution from human activity. So those are the two things they track: the health of the greenbelt and the presence of human exacerbated nutrient levels. And they produced this report, and I would say 2/3 of the report is educational material, and 1/3 is the actual results, and it's really worth reading because that educational material is very specific to our lake. So I'll encourage you to read the report, and I'm going to attach it to the posting, and I'm going to summarize some of the contents here. Okay, in terms of the background material, what's important about this report? The report really focuses on nutrients, and first of all, nutrients sounds like a good thing. Why are nutrients bad? Why are we trying to manage or control them? What are the nutrients? They're nitrogen and phosphorus. And you have nitrogen and phosphorus together in the water, it produces algae. And some level of algae is good. It's the base of the food chain. But when we have too many nutrients coming into the water, we have too much algae. And these unnatural levels of algae cause problems for us. They cloud the water, so it's not as pretty. But worse than that, the algae dies and it sinks, and when it decomposes, it uses up the oxygen. It stresses marine life through the entire food chain. It also causes weed growth, which we don't like. None of us like. It causes that filamentous green algae that washes up on the beaches. And sometimes we say, oh, someone's harvesting, they're cutting the algae and it's washing up on my beach. No, that's just algae that's growing from unnatural levels of nutrients in the water. A lot of this organic material then dies, sinks, and it creates a mucky bottom. We like our nice, firm, sandy bottom, but nutrients age the lake and turn the bottom mucky. It's very difficult once you have institutional sources of nutrients. It's very difficult to get rid of them. One more point on nutrients. Nitrogen has a very natural cycle to it. It comes and goes. Nitrogen enters the water. Through a cycle, it goes back into the air. It's a big part of the atmosphere. It's a big part of rain. Rain has a lot of nitrogen. Phosphorus doesn't have the same type of cycle. When it gets in the water, it tends to stay there. So the way this works is there's phosphorus there, and when it gets stirred up, the nitrogen that is more constantly present combines with that phosphorus, and you have algae. Those blooms come in cycles, and the limiting source of nutrient is the phosphorus, and the primary source of the phosphorus is sediment that washes from your property. Some of it you don't even see. It washes through your lawn, and your lawn might feel sort of spongy. It's because dirt is flowing into the lake. And the second place is from your septic system. There's a lot of phosphorus there. So that's sort of the limiting factor. There's almost always going to be enough nitrogen for an algae bloom, and you're really concerned with phosphorus. Okay, so the report is pretty clear that nutrient pollution is what ages the lake. It's what our concern is. It's slowing that aging process, making sure it's not a lot faster than nature would age the lake. So what are the sources of these nutrients? The first is natural. We have a big watershed. It's 35 times the size of our lake, And when organic material decomposes in the watershed, when wildlife goes potty, and even in the rain, there are lots of natural sources of nutrients, and that creates, as I said, the base of the food chain, and that's all good. We have a bit of a challenge that our watershed is so large that we end up getting a lot of natural levels from our watershed. So we're 35 times the size of our lake, our watershed is. For comparison purposes, Mullet is 9.7, Charlevoix is 12.8, and Burt Lake is 12.4. So we're several times the size of our watershed. We're going to have several times the amount of natural nutrients headed our way. Nutrients can be removed from water and soils from plants with complex root systems. And when we replace land that has forest and shrubs and complex root systems with buildings, with roofs, with driveways, with walkways, with decks and porches, those impervious surfaces accelerate the flow of surface water, reduce infiltration, and it changes how much of the nutrient gets to the water versus being absorbed by plants. So one source of the excess nutrients is the impervious surface, and a way to think about that is that normally in a forest, 80 to 90% of the water, the rain that falls, is going to absorb in the ground, and the nutrients get drawn out through the roots. When you harden the land, or when you grade an area, if you fill a wetland, then you're reducing the portion of the rain that is going to get into the water and increasing water that's coming over the top. So the stuff that goes into the ground, you have microbes that take care of the toxins and the bacteria. You have roots that draw out the nutrients. You just have the soils that filter out sediments, and the lake gets really good water. It's clean, it's cool, it's got natural levels of nutrients, not too much, and no bacteria and such. The bad stuff is what flows in the water. So when you harden the land with an impervious surface, you're flipping that ratio, and more of the water is staying at the surface, and that's the bad stuff. And you're flipping the ratio of the good stuff versus the bad stuff. The second area is your septic system. And we don't have any roots right on our field, so we rely on deep, complex root systems between our field and the water to draw nutrients, to draw all of that phosphorus and nitrogen out of your septic effluent and bring it into the plants and recirculate it in the air in a very natural process. So those are key sources of nutrients. It's things that we apply to our lawns. It's things that go into our septic system. It's nature that flows over the surface. So some level of the human impact is handled by nature. It's not, the goal is not to eliminate all sources of human nutrients, because that's not possible. And it's also okay that that human activities introduce some, because nature has its way. This infiltration process, when water is allowed to get in the ground, if we haven't graded or made impervious or eliminated complex root systems with lawns, infiltration is going to take care of a lot of the nutrients introduced in the watershed. Not all of it. When we're trucking in lots of fertilizers from outside our watershed and we put them on our lawns or golf courses and farms, no, those are heavy loads of nutrients. The other ways that nature handles it is dilution. We have a big lake, 10,000 acres of lake. We're going to get a lot of dilution from its size. We're going to get some flushing because we have a lot of flow down the lower Black River. The leftover nutrients that nature doesn't take care of through dilution, flushing, and infiltration, and they serve as the base of the food chain. So the food chain can get richer with the fish and the crustaceans and all the stuff that feeds at the base of the food chain can eliminate a bit of that as well. Okay, so a lot of that educational material is covered very well in this report. Let's talk about the results. The key takeaway, the largest issue that is shared in this report, is that when compared to other lakes in our region, Black Lake has a high number of parcels exhibiting shoreline alterations, poor green belts, and moderate levels of cladophora growth. Okay, so 70% of our shoreline around the lake has had shoreline vegetation removed. Even if you have a seawall, you need to have a buffer in front of it. Even if you have a beach, you need to have a vegetated buffer in front of it, or vegetation growing in your sand or portions of your sandy beach. That is the biggest takeaway from the report, is too many of us don't have a vegetated buffer. Now, you may say, well, I don't want to interrupt the view to the lake. Personally, I like looking through trees to see the lake, and that's how my property looks. You have different values, so work within your own values. You can put just a mulch bed with ground cover or something flowering, and that will do something. You can put rocks, anything to slow or divert water and give it a chance to soak in the ground, because that green belt is the lake's last line of defense for the bad stuff that gets into it. We have lots of water that comes through springs into the lake. That's the good stuff. The stuff that creeps over the top that you can't even see, that's the bad stuff. Okay, so that's the key takeaway. Now, the green belt is the last line of defense. The first line of defense is in our watershed, the forest and the wetlands that we have, and we are blessed with 72% of our watershed being covered by forest and wetland. That's good news. We have a very healthy watershed, and I spend a lot of time up there fly fishing and traipsing through the land up there, and a lot of the land is private hunt clubs and fish clubs, and it has certain protections, so that's good, but a lot of the land is state land, and it's logged, and there is sediment loading in the rivers near the logging operations. 20% of our forest has been lost, most of that to logging, since 1975, and 10% since 2001. So the logging activities are reducing the value of that natural land upstream, and that is a problem that's pointed out in this report as well. Okay, so that's at a summary level what the report tells us. At a more detailed level, they studied 805 lots. Let's talk about development. 88% of the lots are developed. That was 87% last time the survey was done, so not a dramatic change. But that is a lot of rooftops, it's a lot of roads, it's a lot of driveways, and that land that's closest to the lake is the most important to be vegetated. So we do have a lot of development on our shoreline. So greenbelt and erosion. The commentary on that topic is that 30% of the lots have shoreline that's in good or excellent condition, less than 1/3. 42%, more than that, more than the 30% that's in good shape, have ratings of poor or very poor. So we, our community, all of us need to look at our green belt and say, how can we do a better job of vegetating that last line of defense? 24%, a quarter of our lake has no green belt whatsoever. Okay, that's a harmful statistic. The evidence of erosion is concentrated on those properties that have poor or very poor green belts, and there is evidence of erosion, and it takes kind of a trained eye to see that there is erosion, but 45% of our shoreline, and mostly that where vegetation has been removed, has visible signs of erosion. 80% 81% of the shoreline has been altered, mostly riprap. It was 80% in 2005, so again, not a great growth in the number of hardened shorelines. But 28% of our lake has seawalls. Seawalls don't, I know, and I know this from my home on the Chesapeake Bay, that we have the same problem. People see their property eroding, they put in a seawall and say, that's it, I'm drawing a line in the sand and it's not moving beyond the seawall. Well, seawalls don't absorb energy. They deflect it to your neighbor's property, and they're going to accelerate lost shoreline on your neighbor's property. It's not a sustainable solution for our lake to harden the whole shoreline, because you're just moving the damage to your neighbors. And the second problem you're doing is eliminating really, really valuable habitat. I mean, that water's edge with a little bit of vegetation and maybe some dead trees laying in it, some rocks, they create hiding places. They create walkways for animals to climb up in sun and get in and out of the water. It's it's the most important part of our habitat in the lake. So 28% of the lake has artificial beaches that are raked and cleaned of all vegetation. 28% has seawalls, and those are areas where there really is no, the natural shoreline does not support the natural mix of wildlife and plant life that our lake depends on. And the last topic from this report is nutrient pollution. 27% of the parcels have presence of cladophora. 70% have light growth, so we do have evidence of excess nutrient pollution. It's not out of control. It's very fixable, but it's going to require that we do make some changes with our green belt. And unfortunately, this result has been reported, the same result in 1991, 2001, 2005, and now again in 2017. So I'm hoping that some of us will go to our website, go into our lake, go into the property owner's responsibilities, the first item under our lake, read through some of the background material, take the self-assessment, give yourself a couple of ideas, register so we know how much of the lake has been self-assessed. I mean, if we self-assess the whole lake, we don't need to pay $8,000 for another assessment 6, 8, 10 years from now, whenever we're going to do it again. But we got to take the responsibility ourselves. You know, we're accountable for the health of our lake, and the first step is just learning what are the things that are going on our own properties that are affecting the lake, and maybe address one or two this year and one or two next year, and over time make a bit of a difference. So in summary, how many more times are we going to pay someone to do a survey to tell us the same problems, and without really charting any progress against it? So let's use the information on our website. Let's use the self-assessment that is really the best practice for the whole state. The best minds and thinking have been incorporated into this offering. Go there, take the assessment, register as someone from Black Lake, and become part of a community that says, I'm going to take the first step, which is I want to be aware of the impacts of my behaviors and my decisions. I may not change them, but I might change some of them. And that makes me part of the community of stewards. And actually, if you take the survey and you register with us, we're going to give you a little plate that you can show on your property that you are part of that community that is part of the solution. So by doing this, we hope that we see more complex vegetation along the water's edge around the lake, closest to the shoreline, but really all of our properties having more complex root structures. We hope to have drawn the line on the introduction of impervious surfaces, especially closest to the lake. We hope that people properly maintain their septic system. They think about what they put in it. They have it pumped out on the right cycle. They have vegetation between their field and the lake. And we hope that people show some level of care and appreciation for the value of wetlands and forest and floodplains and all those places where rainwater is retained. It's soaked into the ground and creating the good stuff for our lake. So thanks for listening through this whole message. Thanks for being part of the BLPS community and caring about our lake. Make sure that you are renewing your membership, and if you can offer some of your time, we sure could use some additional help and time, and we have a lot of fun doing the impactful things that we're working on. So hope to hear from you all, and I hope you have a lot to look forward to this fall and have enjoyed your time this summer up at the greatest lake in the whole world. Thanks. Bye.